The Pacers split a tough back-to-back this weekend with an absolutely brutal scheduling quirk in between. Good games from some guys, rough games from other guys. We'll break it all down. Plus, Tyrese Haliburton, something he's not good at. We'll talk about that today. And something the Pacers can do with their open roster spot that they still haven't used for over a month now. We'll break it all down on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News, and today we are diving in to the Pacers weekend that was, winning in San Antonio, losing in Atlanta in a brutal scheduling quirk that befell the Pacers for their Sunday game against the Hawks. Plus, we're talking about Tyrese Haliburton, and not he had a great weekend, but something he could do a little better to take his game to the next level, and he could take a page out of Karis LeVert's notebook. And then the Pacers still have this open roster spot they haven't used since buying out Tristan Thompson. Why haven't they used it yet? When could they use it? What could they do? We'll break that all down because I haven't talked about that little spot on the team in a while. Let's start with the weekend that was, talking about the actual basketball games. Pacers win in San Antonio, lose in Atlanta. What happened? Well, the highest level overview I can give you is Chris Duarte and Goga Bitadze played in San Antonio, and then they didn't play against the Hawks, and everyone else was out or in for both games. Why does that matter? Because that meant the Pacers had 8 available players against the Hawks Sunday, and that's the minimum you're allowed to have to play a game. And they were flying from Central Time in San Antonio to Eastern Time during the night, where they lost an hour to daylight savings. Hope everybody enjoyed their shorter weekend. That is brutal. They barely slept, they said. Super weird quirk. They were a little late even getting to the arena. So pretty wild, pretty wild stuff for the Pacers in that scheduling quirk kind of game. And that's really why they lost that one. I mean, they had no chance, and yet they still hung in tough. They lose by 3. They were down 19 at one point to Atlanta and cut it to 3 with a valiant comeback. Trae Young, though, 47 points too much. Against the Spurs, the Spurs rested a bunch of guys. It was the game after Greg Popovich set the record for most wins by a head coach. So it was impressive that they got that record done, obviously, but they sat a bunch of guys on the second night of a back-to-back. Spurs clearly realizing they're probably out of the play-in race, and so Pacers get an easy one there. No one even scoring 20 points for the Pacers in that game, and they still cruised past San Antonio. So what were the themes this weekend as the Pacers split, get their 8th road win before nearly getting a crazy comeback win against Atlanta? The biggest theme to me was Duane Washington, after struggling mightily for a better part of a month after the Pacers trade deadlines, and the Pacers were really struggling without any bench guard production, really. I mean, Lance was giving him some, but that's it. Duane Washington had a killer weekend. 19 points against the Spurs, all in the first half, by the way. 22 was his career high. I thought he was going to break it that night. He only took 2 shots in the second half, did not end up getting it. But 19 points, was absolutely on fire, 7 for 7 in the first half, including a dunk that made the NBA top 10 plays from that night. He was fantastic in that game, only played 21 minutes. Then comes back against Atlanta. They really need him. He was their only reserve guard, really, in that game. Keeper Sykes played as well, but Duane had the ball a lot more and was shooting a lot more. 22 points, tying his career high in that game. On 8 for 17 shooting, hit 4 threes, and dished out 3 assists, right? He fills in a little more as the creator when all these guys are out, which is something he struggled with in the past, but was really good at against the Hawks. So really, really impressive weekend from Duane Washington to be busting out of this slump. He's now up to top 15 among rookies in points per game, nearing that 10 points per game mark for an undrafted two-way player. Really impressive weekend for him as he finds his footing with the new look Pacers team. And for a guy who's so rhythmic, right? A lot of his good games are based on being in rhythm and being connected to his teammates and understanding what's going on. Having all that broken up when the Pacers made a bunch of trades was clearly very tough for him. It took him a while to find a way to have an impact again. Looks like he's busted out of that slump for a better part of a week now. And this weekend, excellent with over 40 points in these 2 games. I thought that was a big theme. Tyrese Haliburton also very good, which is noteworthy with Brogdon out. Again, I don't think it's a matter of touches. It's just a matter of what he's able to do volume-wise in terms of getting shots up. And against the Spurs, double-double. He had a double-double in both games. 19 points, 10 assists, took 17 shots, hit 3 threes, 4 turnovers, but 3 steals as well. He was very good. controlling the game in that way, running the show. His pick and roll connection with Isaiah Jackson looks very good. His two-man game, little pitch actions with Buddy Hield look very good. He was playing well off of Goga Batadze in this game, who was very good against the Spurs. Excellent start to the weekend from Haliburton and the win. Then they play Atlanta, and he had 25 and 10, his second double-double. Again, 5 turnovers, something he's got to dial back, but that's where the difference without Brogdon is. He gets a little more, opportunities to be the creator instead of just, pinging off of a secondary action. And he has to be a little more aggressive in those instances. And that's where a few more turnovers came in, but still shot the ball very well, hit 3 threes again, 9 for 15, 10 assists, +2 in both games, actually. So they win his minutes both times this weekend. Still looks very good as the lead ball handler, as a secondary guy, whatever role he's been in, he's been awesome. And 2 double-doubles this weekend against 2 decent teams and tearing up these defenses, setting up the skeleton crew Pacers that are currently healthy. He was very impressive this weekend. They'll hope that can continue. The Pacers really going forward without Brogdon, or even when he does potentially return soon. And another theme, Isaiah Jackson, 2 great games, 15 and 5 against the Spurs, and only 3 fouls in over half the game, which for him is a huge step forward. Doesn't sound like it is, but it is. His defense was special in that game. He was a +16. He had 2 blocks, and Rick Carlisle talked about his fouling after the game. It was just learning what NBA players do and what he can get away with, he said, and some of it is screens. Right, he's got to be better about those screen fouls. It seems like he has one of those every game. And then another good game from Isaiah Jackson against the Hawks, 12 points, 15 rebounds, 6 offensive, 2 blocks. They play his 28 minutes dead even. So less fouls for Isaiah Jackson this weekend, 2 fantastic scoring performances and good rebounding performance. In Atlanta, he again is also improving every game. And as he cleans up the fouls, he can play more, he can get better, he can improve. So those guys, Tyrese Haliburton, Duane Washington, and Isaiah Jackson, they were my thematic best Pacers this weekend in terms of exceeding expectations, showing something new, being good. They both had special games that were noteworthy for the Pacers as they're in this evaluation and growing standpoint. Some other guys had one good game or something noteworthy about them this weekend that I felt was worth covering. One, Goga Batadze against the Spurs. Once again, a very good performance from him. His 3rd good game in a row, 10 points, 7 rebounds in just 20 minutes. 4 blocks as well. His defense was really special in that game. If he had hit any of his threes, his game would have looked even more impressive, something he has been doing better since the All-Star break. He's dealing with this foot thing, and for him and for Chris Duarte, who's dealing with the toe thing, it was impossible for them to play. And then on such short turn, like I mentioned earlier, flying from San Antonio to Atlanta with the lost hour on top of the time zone change, it was impossible for them to turn around and play again the next night. I imagine they'll be healthy for Tuesday. So he can only play once, but Goga was good against the Spurs. That's his 3rd good game in a row. And if he can keep that momentum going, his future with this team looks a lot rosier. He also, like Duane Washington, because I've mentioned on the show many times, has these rule-following ways. It took him a little bit to get acclimated to his new team, but it looks like Goga is, and on defense especially, his impact has continued to improve recently. Kiefer Sykes got to play twice this weekend. He's been out of the rotation for a little bit with Lance Stevenson out and with Malcolm Brogdon out. Did pretty well against the Spurs, 3 for 6 from the field for 9 points. Probably his best game in a while. 3 assists as well, +8 as he controlled a very solid Pacers second unit that night. Not so good against the Hawks. Only player to not score for the Pacers that night, missed all his shots. But a balanced weekend and good to see him contribute in a game. He had not had serious minutes in a while, so the fact that he's able to jump in, shoot 50% was nice. And then Terry Taylor, speaking of guys who haven't played, Terry Taylor does not play against the Spurs. Sort of perplexing, like we talked about on Friday's show, that he doesn't play in every game. Against the Hawks, they only have 8 available. Not only does he play, he starts, plays over half the game. Lo and behold, 16 points, 3 offensive rebounds, 6 for 8 from the field, even buried a pick and pop 3, tried a behind-the-back pass, was shot faking and driving. I just continue to think he has such a nice, varied skill set for a guy at his height who can do stuff that he does. I still feel like he should play more, and that game kind of showed more about all of the stuff Terry Taylor can do. Cool to see him not only get to start, but play decent minutes for the first time in a while. So I basically just talked about everybody who played this weekend except for O'Shea Brissett and Buddy Hield and Jalen Smith. But overall, a pretty good weekend from the Pacers. They got the loss that they needed for their tank standings. They got a nice win and built some continuity with their new guys in San Antonio. And that schedule was just brutal. Scott Agnes of Fieldhouse Files was asking O'Shea Brissett, and O'Shea agreed. It kind of felt like an AAU game when they played Atlanta, and they only had 8 guys even available to play, running out against a full Hawks team. It just felt a little abnormal for an NBA setting. Decent split. They've got the Grizzlies coming up Tuesday. That'll be a tough one. We'll be talking about that Tomorrow, let's talk about Tyrese Haliburton, and not something he did well because he did have an awesome weekend, but something he could do a little better. And James Boyd of the Indy Star actually put me onto this, so I wanted to dig in the stats, and something happened in the Hawks game that made me really want to talk about this. As a full segment, Tyrese Haliburton needs to copy Caris LeVert, get all the way to the rim. Let's talk about it, but before we do that, let's talk about the good folks over at Built Bar who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. They make it easy to stick to your New Year's resolutions. Hopefully you haven't given up yet. What are they? They're protein bars that are actually good. They taste like a candy bar. They're 100% covered in chocolate. Super easy to chew, not those chewy, cardboardy craps you get at the store. They're absolutely delicious. They're like actually a treat. And that's what makes them the best protein bars ever. But not only that, they're super healthy, right? Most of them have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. You can check out all the macros for any flavor straight on their website. Check them out at built.com. I love the peanut butter brownie. I have one almost every day. You can try many of their other delicious flavors, fruit varieties, puff varieties with marshmallows. Cookie dough is really popular. Mint brownie is really popular. Coconut almond was delicious. You can check them out yourself. Go to built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15. When you check out, you'll get 15% off your order. That promo code again is LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every single day. For your second listen, why not go check out the good folks over at Locked On Now, breaking down all the latest action and news from around the NBA from your local experts, including me. From Pacers Hawks, you'll hear Brad Brooland from the Hawks side over on the Locked On Now podcast. So Tyrese Haliburton, obviously fantastic player, playing very well for the Pacers. Now been around for a month and looking like a cornerstone for this franchise. When he maybe has the chance to be one of the better players in franchise history, though obviously his growth will dictate that. Was fantastic this weekend, and yet there's something about him I think he could do a little better. James Boyd got me onto this of the Indy Star. Follow all his work over in the Indy Star. Sometimes Tyrese Haliburton needs to get all the way to the rim, and he does not do that. He either pulls up for a floater or takes. This is the shot that always makes me think about it. He does this kind of scooping layup from about 8 feet out around his defender. And he actually makes that shot a good percentage of the time. It's a good shot. He should continue to take it. But it always, when he takes it, because it's so unique and different than other players, makes me think about the fact that he isn't getting all the way to the rim on his drives. And this is something that Caris LeVert, that, like I mentioned earlier, really struggled with struggled with is the wrong word, really needed to focus on with the Pacers, and something the coaching staff talked about with him all the time. Caris, drive all the way to the basket. You finish better there. You can make more decisions there. You break the defense down more there. And all those same things apply to Haliburton. And if you notice with Caris, some of this was his health improving too. But as the season went on, he got better and better for the Pacers. He was really good in January from a scoring perspective. His passing got a little better because he was getting all the way to the rim, and that allowed him to be a more effective offensive basketball player. So let's talk about what the stats say about Haliburton here and what he needs to do. He obviously, again, is good at those little funky shots. His floater's good, and his kind of weird form means when he gets in the lane for floaters, if he pauses for a second and his hand's on the side of the ball, the defender can't tell if he's going to lob or shoot. He is still very dangerous with what he does now. What I'm saying now is just small refinements to what he already does. Because from 3 to 10 feet, he is still shooting 51.7%. That is unbelievably good, right? That's fifth on the Pacers. Everybody ahead of him is a big or Lance Stevenson. Like, that's really good. That's better than Sabonis was for the Pacers this season from 3 to 10 feet. So again, not a bad shot for Tyrese Haliburton. But from 0 to 3 feet, layups basically. Haliburton, 72%, best guard on the Pacers by a mile. Everyone ahead of him is a big. The next, Lance is close to him, but every other guard on the Pacers is basically below 70%. You know, LeVert, for example, 66%. Malcolm Brogdon, 62%. Those are good numbers at the rim. And yet Haliburton's like 10% better. Shooting 72% at the rim is big man numbers, right? Sabonis, 75%. Turner is at 78%. Haliburton's up right around those guys. He's right around Goga at 73%. All that to say, he's a really good finisher at the rim when he gets all the way there. And some of that is that he is selective with his shot, but some of that is that Tyrese Haliburton is a very good finisher at the rim. So obviously one would think, get there more, right? Get there more, even though he's a good mid-range finisher again. Well, if you take the percentage of the shots he takes from 0 to 3 feet, he ranks 22nd on the Pacers this season. Obviously, they don't have 22 players on the roster. They only have 16, but so that includes like Ahmad Kavers ahead of him, and he was only played one game. You know, Justin Anderson's ahead of him. And that's not to say, you know, those guys are actually better than him at getting to the rim, but that does kind of display like he does not get to the rim. Remember, 11.3% of Haliburton shots come from 0 to 3 feet. That's lower than Buddy Hield, 3-point specialist Buddy Hield, who takes over half his shots from deep. That's about the same rate as Justin Holiday, who shot 73% of his shots from deep. Kiefer Sykes takes more shots at the rim as a percentage of his shots than Haliburton, despite being like 6 inches shorter. Caris LeVert, who really struggled with this, was at 19.5%. Again, we're talking about 11% for Haliburton, right? Duarte, who's still learning about the NBA speed, is at 20%. He is even with Haliburton's really good finishing from, short mid-range and in the paint that isn't at the basket. He still needs to get to the rim much more than he currently is. That is a ghastly low number, like stunningly low. Jeremy Lamb is the only serious dribbler on the team this season who had a lower percentage of shots at the rim than Tyrese Haliburton. He's got to be better at this. And he drives all the time, right? 12.7 drives per game for Haliburton. That's before the Hawks game. I think that number is probably a little higher now, right? TJ McConnell is at 11.4 drives per game. And TJ McConnell is thought of almost exclusively as a passer. Very people think of TJ McConnell as a shooter or like a play finisher. And McConnell, in fewer drives per game than Haliburton on average this season, and he played in more games for the Pacers than Haliburton has, shot more times off of drives per game than Haliburton is for the Pacers right now. McConnell shot 3.9 times per game off of drives in his 24 games this season. Haliburton, before this Hawks game, was at 3.5 shot attempts per game off of drives on 12.7 per game, right? That's just low. And McConnell is almost purely classified as a setup man, pure point guard type, right? And Haliburton is not classified that way. He can obviously shoot more from deep and takes mid-range shots, and like those are good. He's good at hitting them. These aren't to belittle the skills that Tyrese Haliburton has. It's just to say, look at what other guys are doing who are having success getting to the rim and finishing, and that is something he can copy and do well, and he can shoot so well at the basket that he needs to do more, right? Even if you look at Brogdon and LeVert, the two high volume drivers on this Pacers team this season, LeVert was at 16.3 drives per game. Brogdon was at 18.1. They were both shooting, LeVert was shooting 8 times per game off drives, Brogdon at 7. Right, that's twice as much as Haliburton, basically. And in Brogdon's case, despite shooting twice as much, he also was passing more off of drives. Haliburton takes the mid-range shot more, which kind of dilutes this stat, or he pulls out of drives more with his own dribble, right, which Brogdon rarely does. So his stats are a little different here. But like Brogdon is able to both get shots up off drives, or he finishes well. 53% of his shots go in off drives, and pass well. So Haliburton's assist percentage and pass percentage on drives basically rivals that of TJ McConnell. He gets more assists because his passes are better, right? He's more adventurous and creative with his passing. But Tyrese Haliburton, all these words and numbers and gobbledygook I just threw at you to say he needs to get all the way to the rim more on his drives. I think that would help him become a better finisher and a more efficient scorer, while also making it easier for him to get those passes to his teammates, right? If you get close to the basket, you have the lob threat, you have the opposite corner open. We've seen that from him all of the time. And those are good finishes. Isaiah Jackson's a great lob threat. Jalen Smith has been. The corner three's been open for the Pacers more since Haliburton got here. This is not to belittle what he's currently doing. But if you get all the way to the rim, that even Buddy Hield, when he drives all the way to the rim, is able to find passes to the opposite wing or passes to the strong side wing, or even find the big on a simple wraparound. It's like different, but more options are there with just one more dribble towards the basket. And that is really what helped Caris LeVert this season, right? He was, I mentioned him earlier, not struggling necessarily because he was hurt early in the season, but his scoring effectiveness from when he returned or when he started off his season to the end of November, so basically the first month and a half of the season, he shot 41%, was at 14.5 points per game and 2.9 assists. And then from the beginning of December to the end of his tenure with the team, he got up to 21 points per game, shooting 46%, and got the assists up to 5.4 as he continued to work on getting all the way to the basket and being able to open up all of those options. So what Haliburton does now is obviously working very well, and he's very good at it. He's got, again, he can get into the paint and create for others, and his herky-jerky floater goes in all the time, and it's very good for lob threats. It's really special. He should continue to utilize that very often. But if every so often he mixed in a drive where he took 2 more dribbles or 1 more dribble than he already does, I think that would add a more varied approach to his game, help the Pacers offense just a little bit more, and open up just a little bit more of teams expecting him to shoot. I think that's going to matter at some point. Being a TJ McConnell volume of shooter off of drives doesn't really scream that he's going to be like the scoring threat, and will eventually change the way he's defended, I think. So I think it's a key for Haliburton to drive all the way to the rim, and be that high-level creator. And he's very close to being that now. He's very good at scoring now. He's very good at setting up his teammates. That's why he had 2 double-doubles this weekend. This is a weird time to throw in this segment, but I noticed the scoop shot in the Hawks game to the point that I wanted to dig into the numbers, and I was really surprised, honestly, at how jarring they are, even compared to what the eye test says. So a focus for Haliburton to me should be getting all the way to the basket, all the way to the rim, right around the basket where he can shoot and score. I think that'll help him. I think that'll help his teammates. I think it'll help the Pacers offense, and it has very little to no detriments or drawbacks. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Let's pivot. Talk about the Pacers roster in general. They have an open roster spot. They have for a while now. What are they going to do with it? Well, I don't know, but I have ideas on why they haven't used it yet, what they could do with it. Well, how we got to this point. So let's talk about that. But before we do that, let's talk about the good folks over at betonline.net. It's that time of year again. College basketball tournament is finally upon us, and I can't believe it. The Hoosiers are dancing. They're kind of they're in the play-in thing, but they're in it. And for all the latest odds, contests, and player props, betonline.net is the #1 source for all of your sports betting needs and info this season. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, sports podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering and information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. They've got other sports on there too, with baseball coming back. So head over to that website, betonline.net today, or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action over at betonline.net. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen every single day. Go check out Locked On NBA to hear about all the action around the league last night. Kevin Durant killing the Knicks with 53 points. Can't wait to hear what they have to say about that. But let's talk about the Pacers roster. They have this open roster spot from buying out Tristan Thompson. And if you listen to the show back around then in February when this happened, I talked about this sort of ad nauseum, but the Pacers saved money doing that, but they still had luxury tax concerns and they bought out Tristan Thompson in the middle of February. By waiting to sign someone, their tax concerns are basically now gone. The minimum salary for the rest of the season, even the prorated MLE the Pacers have for the rest of the season, is to the point now where the Pacers could sign someone for the rest of the season and still have basically no luxury tax concerns. Miles Turner's not making all defense, and Buddy Hield's statistical thresholds that he can reach to hit some of his bonuses are in enough focus that I think the Pacers can safely sign a player for the rest of the season. Now, they had to wait a little bit after buying out Thompson, about 2 weeks. They got to early March before they could bring someone in. But now very little is stopping the Pacers from signing someone. I was curious about this. I didn't get a chance to go to practice last week because of my day job. So I was hoping they'd practice this weekend. Obviously, they had 2 games, so they didn't. But James Boyd asked about it Friday. I keep bringing him up. It's like he's driving the topics for today's show. But he asked Carlisle about it on Friday's practice, which I wrote an article about the answers in Forbes about what the Pacers' options are with their last roster spot. But Rick Carlisle basically said, nothing is imminent. We don't know exactly what we're going to do with that spot yet. We have some options, but we don't know. It's all up in the air. So still nobody is signed, and they have no tax concerns left. So why don't they sign someone, even to a minimum deal, to a 10-day deal? Why don't they convert a contract and add someone on a backfill that 2-day deal? Why don't they do that yet? Well, the short answer is I don't know, right? They could do it now. And if they don't have someone they love, there's kind of no point because, well, before this Hawks game, I guess, they've had a full rotation. They've had guys available every game. They have young guys playing. They're evaluating just fine. Like, they don't need to bring someone in. It's not like they have a hole in their rotation or something that bringing in someone's going to do. And if you're Herb Simon, you spent to the point that you're 15th in payroll this season, right up against the tax, and your team stunk. Like, saving some money is probably appealing, especially being 100% sure you're going to get that tax revenue break this year from the tax-paying teams. Yeah, okay. So wait it out and sign someone later. That's fine. I get why the Pacers are waiting and maybe being a little cheap because they don't have a need right now. It's not like they have to dive in and sign someone. But at the same time, you have every spot on your roster is an asset. Even bringing in someone that might not even play in a game, just to evaluate for 10 days. Do they fit your culture? Do they fit your ethos? Does their play style fit your team? Is kind of a data point for other similar players of that style, for that player specifically in future seasons. Maybe they do get on the court and they succeed. So I think they should probably bring someone in somewhat soon. And a reason this is kind of getting relevant now is there's 28 days left in the season. And players can sign 2 10 days with the same team during a season. Then they have to be signed for the rest of the season. And that's important to me because, if the Pacers want to do what I just said. Figure out if someone fits their ethos, figure out if someone fits their play style on the court. If they want to do that for multiple players, they basically have to start pretty soon. They can sign a guy for 10 days. If it doesn't work, a different guy for 10 days. If that doesn't work, a different guy for the rest of the season. They can't really start shuffling if they wait. Now, the other factor is if they wait about a week, basically exactly a week, then there'll only be 20 days left in the season. And then they could just sign a guy for 10 days. They don't have to worry about guarantees or signing a guy for the rest of the season or anything like that. That could also be appealing, right? So the Pacers waiting to this point is pretty interesting to me. I think it's mostly about money savings because they don't have any needs. They don't need to sign a player. No one should be banging on the doors of Pacers HQ saying, use the 15th roster spot. In fact, me talking about it is not a waste of air, but they don't need to do anything. I just think it's curious that they haven't yet. And so I don't know why they wouldn't really. I mean, outside of money savings, but we'll see if they actually do anything. So what are their options? I've talked about it before, but I think it's a little more relevant today because of something going on in the G League. But their options are, for the refresher, convert someone on a two-way deal, which is Duane Washington or Terry Taylor, to a standard contract, and then backfill, if they wanted, that two-way spot with a different signing of a guy on a two-way contract. So their new player would be on a two-way deal, and then either Washington, who's on fire recently, or Taylor, who's super talented and unique in skill, would get a pay bump and maybe future seasons on their deal. That's why they would do it, to get future seasons on that player's deal. That's option one. Option two is sign a guy for the rest of the season, and option three is sign someone to a 10-day contract. Effectively, that's the same thing. You're getting a guy on a minimum deal for the amount of time you put on his contract. 10-day better for the Pacers, rest of the season better for the player. 10-day way more likely at this point in time. So all that, I didn't even get to the G League. The reason I think that right now it's a little more relevant, especially with the G League, is Justin Anderson. I want to bring him up for a second. He was on the Pacers earlier this season, if you'll recall, on that on a 10-day hardship deal. He got signed the same day as Lance Stevenson, if you'll recall, and played in 3 games for the Pacers. Played really pesky defense, 3 points per game. Didn't score necessarily well, but still played well. Played under Carlisle before in Dallas, right? He is on fire for the Mad Ants right now. 31.9 points per game since the start of February. He is just absolutely killing it. Every time the Mad Ants play, basically, he scored 20 points or more in all but one of, I think, their games since the start of February. He is on fire. So the Pacers kind of know how he fits with their team. So maybe they don't need to get him in for that evaluation, but it wouldn't stun me if they said, hey, let's try him for 10 days and see how he fits in this situation or something like that, because he's playing so well. And as we've seen in the past, O'Shea Brissett, we saw this with Edmund Sumner got the call up. Steph Hicks got the call up. Trey McKinney-Jones. You can go on and on through Mad Ants time and history. A lot of guys who do well with the Mad Ants get a bump up to the Pacers on a 10-day deal. That's kind of how they've done this for a while. Wouldn't stun me to see Justin Anderson get a 10-day, especially on his recent heater. But there are a lot, they have Jordan Bell, Nate Hinton doing well down there recently. Gabe York's doing well for that squad recently. So the trouble is, again, if you bring someone up, like, you want to see them play in a game to kind of truly evaluate them. Like Brissett on his first 10-day last year barely played. Like on one of the last days of his 10 days, I think, was that Rockets game where he played okay and he got the second one and then played more. Everybody knows that story by now. So it's kind of like you're just having Herb Simon spend money for nothing if he doesn't play in a game besides that evaluation of how the player fits in their ethos. So I think it matters a little bit that they pick, okay, that they just played against the Hawks with 8 guys. Like, did they need a forward in that game? Their bench was a center and Jalen Smith and 2 guards in Washington and Sykes. Maybe they want to snag up a forward from the Mad Ants, but maybe they want a guard, right? Maybe they want to try someone in Kiefer Sykes' spot. That would help Gabe York out. Maybe they want to try a big so they can decrease Jalen Smith's minutes because of his contract coming up, or maybe they feel they want to try someone in Terry Taylor's spot who has been getting some deep do not plays recently. Maybe that would bring Jordan Bell in. I don't know what they're thinking for what the team's needs are and what they're willing to spend resources on at this point in time. In fact, I don't even know if the Pacers are willing to spend resources at this time. They may not ever sign anyone with this roster spot. But I do think, because Carlisle just talked about it, and because the 10-day clock of cycling through a few guys is running out of time to try a strategy like that, I wanted to talk about this one more time. And Justin Anderson's recent burst in the G League really cemented that this is something I wanted to talk about. So will the Pacers use their last roster spot at some point this season? Honestly, it would kind of stun me if they did nothing with it for basically a month and a half. But when the exact timing to do something is perfect, I don't really know. I don't know if there is a best time, maybe like a week from now, when they can just do 2 10 days and then close out the season without having to do any future guarantees. That might make some sense and be a reason they haven't done anything yet. But we'll see. I ultimately think that a two-way guy gets converted at some point this season, but I don't know about how those private negotiations go between anybody or anything or what every party wants. So impossible to say what they'll do, just given my insight of the cap rules, what's going on, and how much time's left in the season. I wanted to share what the Pacers could do with their final roster spot. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Locked On Pacers today. We'll be back tomorrow talking with the Locked On Grizzlies host about the Grizzlies because the Pacers play them Tuesday, but not about the preview for the game because, again, the games are less important for the Pacers at this point in the season, but instead, what did the Grizzlies do well in their rebuild? They're not the third in the West after doing a teardown from the Conley Gasol era in late 2010s decade, and they're already looking very prime for a long and successful era of Grizzlies basketball. How did they do it? What did they do so well to get to this point? We'll talk about all that and how the Pacers can emulate it and copy it. Should be awesome. Thanks a ton for listening today, everybody. Hope you had a great short weekend, and we will see you tomorrow.